Hey, what is up guys, MurganMan4 here, and today I'm going to be talking about Can You Hear Me, the 7th episode of Series 12, and the first to be written by new writer Charlene James. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So I have to admit, in the lead up to this episode, I was really excited for it. It seemed like a proper horror-based episode. I love the basic concept of it. Basically, they're just being put through their nightmares and having to, face them from this intergalactic being, which people had guessed were going to be Eternals based off of dialogue that was heard way back when they were filming the episode on location. There's a bit where they were filming on location, and it turns out that was correct, which is pretty cool. It's great to have that kind of connection to the classic series, because the Eternals, or the Immortals, whatever you want to call them, they haven't really appeared much in the new series, which is kind of surprising. In the classic era, you had the Eternals that show up in Enlightenment. Of course, you have the Black and White Guardians, and retroactively, the Celestial Toymaker was made one of those. And actually, all three of those are name-checked in this episode, which was pretty nice. Now we have a couple new Immortals to add to those ranks, with Zelen and... oh, I can't remember the other one. I think it's Rakaya? Could be wrong about that. Zelen is the main one here. Even though he does kind of serve Rakaya, Zelen he's basically the big bad of the episode. Now, I have to admit, I was slightly underwhelmed by it. I did really enjoy it, but I don't know, this really should have been a two-parter. It feels really messy at points, like the plot doesn't have enough time to really breathe. We're just kind of going from one thing to the other, and then the ending especially felt really rushed. I really wish we had a two-parter to flesh this out. Even if the episode had been 60 minutes, it would have been better, but I think this really could have worked as a two-part story. I don't know where the midpoint would end up being placed, but there simply wasn't enough time to tell this story in 50 minutes. So it's kind of a shame that it was relegated to just being a single-part story. Because in concept, conceptually, I love this episode. It's great in theory, and honestly, still in execution, I did think it was really good still. But it was let down by how much it was limited. And I also think it was somewhat odd to have a decent amount of the episode set in 14th century Aleppo there's this one woman that we had a particular focus on, because ultimately it just didn't add anything. You didn't need that there. It was cool to be able to visit that time and place, but I don't know, it just kind of took away from the story for me. I feel like it should have been a stronger focus on the companions, which most of the focus was on them, and we also have a connection with Ryan's friend Thibaut, who's getting these nightmares as well. But it would have been better, I think, to just focus on the companions and who they know, back at home, than have this random girl in 14th century Aleppo having these problems. And I know, the main reason I think was just to get the Doctor separate from the other companions, but they really didn't need to do that. She could have just found something awry in present-day Sheffield. They didn't have to go all the way to a different time period. So I thought that was kind of odd. That stuff didn't really add anything for me. But I did really enjoy seeing their everyday lives being explored a little bit more, because we haven't seen too much of that up to this point. Actually, it's really kind of ironic in that this is probably the best episode for character development that we've had for these companions. And it really should have been in Series 11, because this really would have helped establish them a bit better, and again, like with Praxeus, justify all three companions being present, because this is, again, an episode I feel like there's actually something for all of them to do. Well, maybe not necessarily to do. They don't do a lot, but they all have a purpose. There's something to explore with each of them, because they all have these different kinds of fears, and they all kind of have different reasons, way established back in Series 11, they all have different reasons for running away with the Doctor, and this kind of delves into that a little bit more as well. But I did like that exploration of their fears, but some of them, especially Yaz's, which was a heavy focus in the episode, it felt weird to not have any sort of build-up to it, with this coming so late, especially if Series 12 is the end for these companions, or at least like Ryan and Yaz, as it seems to be signposted to be. It feels really strange for this major block of development to come so late, and I liked it. It just feels really weird in its placement, because this stuff really should have been explored in Series 11. But their nightmares, too, were interesting to explore, but this is part of the other reason why I wish it had been a two-parter, because other than Yaz, Ryan and Graham barely get any focus with their nightmares, and same with the Doctor. They're all like, snap, 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 but Yaz has a much bigger focus on her nightmare, and the resolution to that goes on for a good 5-6 minutes near the end of the episode. So if there was more time, you could have also explored a lot more with Ryan and Graham, and even the Doctor to an extent as well. Because what we did glimpse with the other two I thought was pretty fascinating. With Ryan, he's starting to become afraid that, him going away, he's abandoning his friends, and what if he eventually comes back too late or something? What if they need him and he's not there? And so that's kind of what his nightmare is about. And I think that's a really interesting concept to explore with a companion. And near the end of the episode, he's also talking with Yaz about like, how long is this going to last? Is this just our lives forever now? So I think those kinds of stuff are kind of signaling the departure of at least Ryan and Yaz pretty soon. I don't think they're going to be in Series 13. I wouldn't think Graham would be in Series 13 either, but him leaving hasn't really been foreshadowed at all. And also, apparently, it's been seen on his CV that he's going to be in Series 13 as well. But I don't really see a reason why he would stay on if Ryan left. Like, if just Yaz left, yeah, sure, he would stay on. But I don't know why he would continue traveling with the Doctor if Ryan stopped. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Maybe none of them leave at all, or maybe all three do leave. Who knows? We'll have to wait a few more weeks at least, or maybe even until the next special to find that out. Graham's nightmare as well I thought was pretty interesting. Not as interesting as Ryan and Yaz's, but it was also neat to explore his fear of his cancer coming back, which, aside from... He had a checkup at the beginning of the season in Spyfall, but aside from that, I don't think it's been mentioned since The Woman Who Fell to Earth. But he, kind of has this nightmare that his cancer has come back and it's more aggressive than ever and he's going to die from it. He also has a vision of Grace in his nightmare as well, which was good to see Sharon D. Clarke back, because we haven't seen her at all this season, and she was one of the best parts about Series 11, I thought. So it was nice to have a cameo from her again. And even at the end of the episode, Graham brings it up to the Doctor, because he hasn't really talked with anyone about it before. But yeah, he mentions to her that he's afraid that his cancer is going to come back. And in response, the Doctor kind of awkwardly doesn't really know what to say, which I thought was... I mean, I'm kind of in two minds about it, because it does kind of make sense that the Doctor would respond like that. But at the same time, I feel like with something as serious as cancer, there should have been a bit more of a, positive reaction to it. Like, it wasn't a negative reaction, but I feel like it should have been more encouraging than what it was. I don't expressly have an issue with it, although I have seen a lot of people who have taken a big issue with it, but I did think it was kind of odd, is all. The Doctor also has a nightmare about the Timeless Child, or at least who we assume is the Timeless Child, based off of the flashback thing in Spyfall. But there wasn't really that much to talk about there. And it's just kind of more foreshadowing for the finale, which is just kind of more building up to that, but we don't really get much depth from it. The big one in this episode is Yaz's fears, and I really feel like this should have been built up because it's a big part of her past that hasn't really been mentioned or even alluded to before. And it seems kind of significant to just kind of ignore that up to this point, because with both Graham and Ryan's fears and the Doctor's fears, they've all been set up before. But with Yaz, it's revealed by the end of the episode, because when we actually see her nightmare sequence, we don't exactly know what's going on. We kind of get a sense, she doesn't want to be abandoned or alone, but we don't know why she's in the place that she is or why there's a police officer there as well. But by the end of the episode, it's very heavily implied that she had ran away from home and was heavily considering committing suicide, which is a really dark place for Doctor Who to go that I was not anticipating. I do think that it was handled very well, and it was genuinely quite emotional. It's made clear that Yaz has, found what she was looking for in life a lot more. That she's, obviously glad that she didn't go through with it, even if, at the time she thought that's what she wanted. But yeah, it wasn't signposted or foreshadowed or alluded to at any point really up to this point. I mean, I think the closest we've got mentioned is, I think in the Witchfinders, it was mentioned she was bullied in school, and her family is also mentioned in the past, like her sister is also mentioned she doesn't have any friends, but nothing that actually suggests that she would have considered committing suicide. So that's my main issue with it. It was really well done within the episode itself. I just wish that the context that came before it had been done better, because that would have made it even more impactful. And which is also probably another thing that would have helped with this being in Series 11, is that we wouldn't have spent so much time with this character already for this to come out of the blue. But oh well, I guess it is what it is. And like I said, yeah, within the episode, I thought it was handled really well. And yeah, it was a very, I think it was pretty sensitively handled. I do also want to mention, I mentioned the Immortals earlier. I thought they were really cool. I especially really liked Zelen and the performance that was put in by Ian Gilder, I think that's the actor's name. The fingers, those were unexpected. There was a bit in the trailer where his fingers come off his hand, but I just assumed that was part of a nightmare sequence, like he was showing off his spooky powers or whatever. But no, he actually uses the fingers. They fly off his hand, and then they stick inside your ear and kind of extract your nightmares, which is that kind of ridiculous sort of thing that only Doctor Who can really do. And yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. I really liked Ian Gilder as Zelen. And again, another reason why I would have wanted it to be a two-parter, I wanted to spend more time with him and Rakaya as well, just kind of exploring them a bit more. Because, being immortals, they have a very different view on the universe than people who are mortal, obviously. And they just see this whole thing as one big game. They're just doing it for, their entertainment, to pass the eons. Another interesting thing, too, is this is the first Doctor Who episode to ever make use of animation. There's an animated segment in this episode. Basically, when Rakaya, she's basically given this exposition dump, but the animation really helps sell it and make it a lot easier to swallow. It's very stylized, and it works really well. But yeah, that was pretty good, too. I'd say probably one of my biggest issues, though, is just that they were defeated really easily. Obviously, it's standard Doctor stuff to use their own technology against them, but it just seemed too easy. I mean, they're immortals. They're essentially gods, and they're dealt with in 2 seconds. Again, if it was a two-parter, would have had more time to actually make it, make that ending have a bit more depth to it and actually feel a bit more complex instead of how, simplified it was. So that was kind of underwhelming, because It just felt too easy, which is a bit of a shame. But, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this episode. That's the thing, even though I've seen it twice now, I'm still not 100% on my feelings for it. I think it's one of those episodes that's going to take a while for me to actually truly know how I feel about it. But for now, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Probably I'd place it in between Fugitive of the Judoon and Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. And with that, Series 12's average for me has now gone up to 7.42 out of 10. So I'd say it's doing quite well. We've only got 3 episodes left. Next week, we're meeting Mary Shelley on the night that she writes Frankenstein. And here's the thing. The promotional material is treating it as disconnected from the finale, but it's a pretty common assumption by this point that it is going to tie into the finale, and the lone Cyberman mentioned by Captain Jack a couple episodes ago is going to be making its appearance here instead of in Ascension of the Cybermen. So we'll have to wait and see. Can You Hear Me might have been the last actually standalone episode of the season, but I guess we'll have to wait until next week to find out for sure. But yeah, next week is The Haunting of Via Diodati, I think is how it's pronounced. And yeah, please leave your thoughts and opinions on this episode down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And I'll see you with next week's episode of Doctor Who.